General Yamashita, known as the Tiger of Malaya, sends Japanese tanks through the Malayan jungle. He captures Singapore, the pearl of the British Empire, a stronghold that was considered impregnable. Yamashita makes hundreds of prisoners line up in perfect order for an impressive and humiliating review. Yamashita indulges in a chivalrous salute for the Japanese propaganda crew. General Yamashita will be hanged for war crimes in 1946. General MacArthur, commander of US forces in the Philippines, which are now surrounded by the Japanese, is ordered by Roosevelt to escape so as not to be taken prisoner. When he arrives in Australia, he declares, "I shall return." MacArthur's soldiers are taken prisoner, 30,000 Americans with their old 1917 doughboy helmets, and an equal number of Filipinos, who set off for their internment camp 100 kilometers away. This is the Bataan Death March. One of the survivors, Sidney Stewart, recalls, "We marched for 10 days and nights without eating. We were constantly beaten. Those who could no longer go on were killed by the guards, who beheaded them with a sword." In just 5 months, Japan has destroyed the Allied forces in the Far East and conquered half of the Pacific. Tenuhukai Banzai. Long live the Emperor. A huge banzai resounds throughout the empire to celebrate Japan's version of the Lightning War. It reaches General Tojo and the Emperor, who deigns to make an appearance in public with his family. Germany first. Churchill and Roosevelt both agree on this strategy. Their primary objective is to defeat Germany. "We have to bomb it," says Churchill. He creates an air fleet commanded by General Bomber Harris. Harris believes he can win the war with his powerful 4-engined Halifaxes and Lancasters. This strategy is criticized as being costly in terms of men and equipment, but it does begin to take its toll on German cities. On the 8th of March 1942, Essen is bombed, a way for Churchill to help Stalin. The city produces weapons used by the German forces in Russia. The Germans begin to measure the consequences of Hitler's policies. The Nazi regime descends into murderous insanity. Hitler, Goering, Himmler, and his assistant Heydrich begin to implement what they call the final solution: the extermination of Jews in Europe. It is further endorsed at the Wannsee Conference near Berlin in January 1942. That is why Heydrich has come to Paris to organize the rounding up of Jews in France. Their one-way trip to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. The Wannsee Conference is the manufacturing of mass-produced crime. Thousands of Jews are crowded into fake showers and gassed. After the Holocaust by bullets in Russia, the genocide intensifies. In Paris and across Europe, the occupation brings poverty. Everything is rationed. Everything the occupied countries produce goes to feed the German army. The children's fathers are prisoners in Germany. Stalag camps for enlisted men and Oflag camps for the officers. Gaston Sidek, imprisoned in June 1940, writes, "I wasted the 5 best years of my life in that stalag, from 20 to 25, without my wife." In the Oflags, the officers are treated better. The French generals are interned in the fortress of Königstein, near Dresden, including the unfortunate leaders of the Battle of France, such as General Giraud. His jailer takes great delight in filming him during an interesting visit to the city of Dresden, which British bombs would later raze to the ground. At the age of 63, General Giraud will become the hero of an acrobatic escape that will infuriate Hitler. For a while, Giraud will be the rival of General de Gaulle. It is de Gaulle, however, who, from London, embodies the French resistance. In France, attacks against the occupiers have been on the rise, especially since the communists joined the resistance struggle following Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union. In retaliation for the anti-German attacks, hostages are executed. De Gaulle now has a small army fighting alongside the British in Africa, called the Free French Forces. Its members have been sentenced to death by the Vichy government. Some have been fighting since the 18th of June 1940. The most famous among them is General Leclerc. His real name is Philippe de Hautecloque, but he adopted this alias to protect his family back in France. After being promoted to general by de Gaulle, he fashioned a képi for himself, with 2 stars taken from an Italian after the victorious battle in Kufra in Libya. That day, Leclerc said to his men, "Swear that you will not lay down your arms until our flag flies once again over the Cathedral of Strasbourg." For 15 days, at Bir Hakeim in the Libyan desert, other Free French forces repel the German offensive launched by Rommel, the Desert Fox, and his Africa Corps. In this global conflict, the so-called Axis powers, the alliance between Germany, Italy and Japan, are positioned on all fronts. The Africa Corps is just outside Egypt. The Wehrmacht occupies a third of Russia. The Imperial Navy of Japan controls the Pacific, and Germany's submarines are wreaking havoc in the Atlantic. The U-boat is arguably Germany's most dangerous weapon. In the first few months of 1942, these submarines have sunk 4 million tons of Allied ships. Oil tankers, freighters loaded with arms and planes on their way with fresh supplies to an asphyxiated Great Britain. Even though the United States has joined the conflict, the war seems to be lost. The world is on the brink of destruction. The German submariners approach North America. Through their periscopes, they film the bright lights of New York.
We have information that a squadron of planes is headed toward Long Island.
The American newspapers and radios warn the public of possible German air raids. In reality, however, planes do not yet have such a long range of action from Europe. Still, the population is told to black out their lights. It is in fact the West Coast, where the idea of a Japanese attack seems more plausible, that is overtaken by hysteria. Suddenly, 120,000 Japanese Americans fall under suspicion. First, their radios are confiscated, then their fingerprints taken. The government posts orders that introduce emergency measures. Roosevelt declares it is a military necessity. These Americans of Japanese ancestry have lived for generations in California, where they contribute to the agriculture and economy of the state. Most of them are US citizens. They are given 48 hours to vacate their shops and their houses. They are then evacuated in groups to relocation centers far out in the deserts of Utah or up in the snows of Colorado, centers euphemistically called internment camps. A disgraceful spectacle for the United States. In the words of the American novelist Julie Otsuka, "My upbringing was very American. We never spoke Japanese at home. We didn't eat Japanese food. And then my grandfather was arrested by the FBI as a suspected spy for Japan, along with my grandmother, my uncle and my mother. My family has always been very discreet about what happened." But nothing diminishes their loyalty to America. 6,000 will serve as translators in the Pacific. Nearly 20,000 will sign up to combat the Germans in Europe. The rest will be freed at the end of the war. In 1942, America rallies around its flag. Millions of men enlist, while 6 million women go to work to replace them in the armament factories. Roosevelt sets production targets at 125,000 airplanes, 75,000 tanks, and 10 million tons of ships. This is the victory program. But victory is uncertain and very far.